Alright, so this is going to be my sort of post-thoughts discussion on SMT3 as a whole. Don't really think I'll be needing these. The way this is going to work is just going to be me sort of throwing my thoughts in a more objective manner towards a lot of the issues I have with SMT3, because by the time I was done with SMT3, I didn't really think the game was all that good. I kind of thought there were a lot of problems with it. I wouldn't say it's an overall bad game, but my experience was not exactly the most positive across the board. I have nowhere to put this. So let's go ahead and talk about that. I will point out my experience for the record was I had just gotten done beating Persona 4 Golden, and SMT3 was on sale, and I was like, you know what? I played one Atlas RPG. What's so bad about playing another Atlas RPG situation? And for those of you who obviously either did a similar thing as I did, or perhaps you were an SMT player who kind of knew about how like different Persona was, especially SMT3 to Persona 4, big gap there, being Persona 4 being the better game and all. Uh, there was definitely a pretty decent change of experience going into this that I was just not ready for. Thankfully, I kind of went away in the first couple of hours, but that's like the worst part of the game by far. But I'll talk about that later. So basically, yeah, that's my setup. The only Atlas game I had played up until that point was Persona 4. However, I had played other JRPGs before that point, mainly things from the Final Fantasy series. So I didn't exactly come into this one completely blind, but, well, to the game completely blind, yes, outside of knowing Dante was in it, a big DMC channel, so, or I'm not a big DMC channel, but I'm a big DMC fan, so I do talk about Dante quite a bit, so, obviously Dante being there definitely caught my attention as well with the sales. And yeah, that was more or less what I knew going into it. I knew the game was going to be incredibly hard. A lot of people were like, the final boss is going to fuck you up situation. Spoiler warning, that didn't happen, but I'll talk about that later on. And yeah, that was what I went into. My entire journey through SMT3 is on streams, backlogged on my YouTube channel. If anyone watches this and they're curious to see how that story went, I want everyone to see how bad the grinding could be and such. If you were trying to beat the game, I ended up beating the game at level 96, I want to say. Most high level demons I had, except for I think it was Kali, the multi-armed god. I think the multi-armed god. I'm not too sure what their name is right now, and I can't really pause the video to go look at it right now for some reason. On top of that, I did have access to Metatron, but I did not have access to Beelzebub. So Metatron was my only real high level summon outside of like the Archangels at the very end of the game. Obviously, Dante and Pixie were there as well. Pixie, you get her in the True Demon ending run when the 5th Kalpa, which I did have the True Demon run, that's what I was doing. So I experienced the overwhelming majority of the game's content. I would say I've experienced practically the entire game's content, since I also went out of my way to get the final Magatami. Puzzle boy. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure I cleared out almost every single boss. The only things I was not able to accomplish were the graveyards in the Kalpas and the other endings. I don't really feel like replaying the game another 5 times to get those other endings, unfortunately. Maybe when a remake comes out, but not anytime soon. So I ended up feeling that the game, by the time I was done, it was like a 5, a 6, or a 7 if I really wanted to stretch it. Now, just to be clear, while a 5 may sound very bad, I'm a little more neutral on like my game design decisions in terms of rating a game. When I say it's a 5, I think that was like it was just maybe like okay, it wasn't really good. Like there were too many flaws that the good moments kind of died off. The good moments were more bait. Like a lot of the hype moments, if you end up watching my stream, like when I beat Lucifer, are based a lot on circumstances around the game, not the game itself. I have a lot of issues with the way the game's done. Potentially that could be because of what I was told about beforehand. I did experience only the HD remaster, so perhaps there are some things that were changed in the remaster specifically that made my experience perhaps not as complete. I am aware of the fact that apparently some changes were made to the remake version, like apparently the lighting got switched up, so there is that as well. But beyond that, again, just gonna give my thoughts on specific areas of the game, things I want to talk about that I may have discussed on stream, or just kind of explaining why I gave the game such a low rating as I did. Um, Story. Okay, so story's the first one up. This story is very bare bones, very bare bones. Where the start of the story is the conception occurs. Your teacher gets you involved for reasons you're unfamiliar with. You meet Hikikawa, I think. I'm just gonna call him Vegeta Hairline since that's what we kind of called him throughout the stream. You meet Vegeta Hairline. You meet your two friends. One's a boy, one's a girl. I'll just call them female student, male students. I did change their names for my stream, but unfortunately, I do not remember what their real names were. Then you also meet your teacher, and that's about it. Those are like the only characters you meet. You also do meet the young boy at the start, but that doesn't really matter all that much. The young boy shows up every now and again to like taunt you a little bit. So throughout the course of the game, with no real solid cohesive glue sticking together, because you only meet each of these people like okay, fine, I did True Demon Ending. You only meet these people like 3 to 4 times before they randomly get like controlled by their gods or before they merge with their gods. Which it's not a lot of time to properly establish how these characters sort of fall from grace. Like when you meet the male student for the second time, first time after the conception occurs, he's locked in prison. You go save him. Essentially, he gets mad at you for not saving him fast enough, and then he decides, even though again you save him consistently, he decides you don't save him after you defeat. So first you meet him, you fight Thor inside Ikebura. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't remember the direct names of the places. You fight Thor, you free him, he's ungrateful. Then you go to the prison area later on. That's where you meet him again. He's ungrateful. You save him from Black Frost the second time. And then he just decides to disappear completely for a while until you find him again in the Amala network, where you find out he's been absorbing the souls of the sort of like Kagasui? I think it's Kagasui. Which is just the energy source that they need to recreate the world. He has really good design here, actually. His design in this section was really nice. He has like those faces on his body. You can clearly tell he's warping himself. Like, that's clearly not normal. No boss battle in this form, though, which I feel is kind of stupid. Like, if he's already gaining power and he doesn't like us, because, again, I was doing True Demon Ending, like, there should have been a boss fight there in that form. I thought that would have been really cool. Missed opportunity for sure, but it's going to be a missed opportunity for all of them. Then the next time you see him, he's kidnapped your reporter friend, who is a character who sticks around with you throughout the game, but he doesn't really do much besides tell you where to go, and then he goes mad and then decides to take over the Amala network on his own. This fails because the male student stops him, then kills him to summon his god Noah, which is just a giant whale, and then he kind of fucks off until you fight him in the Tower of Kagasuchi. They all follow a similar route, but we'll talk a little bit more about those boss fights a little later. But yeah, like, the summary I've given you is the entire extent of the character you learn with these people, except for your teacher and the Vegeta hair guy. But the Vegeta hair guy, they also explain their reason in these encounters as well. I'll talk a little more about the reasons. No, we're talking about story. That's like, there's not much to the story at all, especially if you're not doing True Demon Ending. At least in the True Demon run, you get like lore bits handed to you, but from what I understand, those are unique to the True Demon Ending only. Or, well, I say unique to the True Demon Ending, but more like unique to the Labyrinth of Amala, which is a new location for this, or it's not, it wasn't there in the original game. So, there are 3 different reasons that you have to follow, or that you can choose to follow to be more accurate, for the birth of the new world. Since the whole point of the conception is to create a new world from the old one. One reason, basically make everyone the same. Equality situation where no one burns brighter than the others, and they all kind of have just the same feelings across the board. Like, they're all just... the way he describes it is, rather than mankind be full of torches with fires, have them all be like light bulbs humming in perfect unison. A world of stillness, I think he calls it. That's the Vegeta hairline guy's world. That's his sort of like That's his reason that he wants to put the next world into. Basically, a perfectly harmonious state of existence. The second one is the male student who believes a world of isolation is the best decision. So he wants to create a world where everyone only has themselves in their own bubbles of what they desire. So if it's just like your paradise, more or less, there's no one who can hurt you, there's no one you need to rely on, it's just whatever you want. Then there's the third reason. This is the reason of the female student where she just decides that strength is the most important thing out there, and in order to have that, you need to be worthy of it. You need to have the strength to take whatever you want. So the strong get stronger, the weak get weaker. It's a world ruled by the strength and one's own will, essentially. If you have the power to make it happen, you can make it happen. Those are the three reasons you follow. There's technically a fourth reason, because even the true demon ending is not really a rejection of reason. It's just a rejection of the three reasons of creation. Because technically in the true demon ending, there's also the freedom ending. There's multiple endings, but I'm only talking about the ones that were kind of more open to me and my decision to play the game. Technically, I could have done maybe the freedom endings, as I rejected everyone else's reasons up until that point, but true demon endings seems canon, so whatever. Like the true demon ending, you're still following a reason regardless. It's just that the reason you're following is the antithesis of creation. So technically, like outside of the freedom ending, you don't really reject an ending, or you don't really reject the reason. It's very bare bones, especially when you're playing it for hours, and a lot of those hours are spent grinding consistently most of the time. It does not lend itself well to a good narrative, again, because you don't even get to challenge or talk to the characters in any way, shape, or form outside of like accepting their reason or denying it. There's no like there's no text paths you can follow. There's no text trees. Like if, for example, in like something like Fallout New Vegas or Dragon Age, you can talk to people, you can try and convince them otherwise, you can learn more about them, but they just give you this big monologue about their reasons why they hate you, or in the case of the young male student, why they hate you, and that's about it. And you're just there kind of like, dude, we barely saw each other like 2 hours ago, what the fuck happened? There's also no clear flow of time going on, which I think is intentional, but it kind of just ruins the pacing of the story as a whole. Then that's about it. Again, the Vegeta hairline guy, also his reason of World of Stillness. While he's not your friend, he does show up on occasion to talk to you, to give his reasoning, and then you run into him a little bit. All three of these characters will end up being merged with their respective gods going down the line for the final boss battle. They don't have boss battles in their in-between states, which seems really silly to have the in-between state at all to begin with. Like, why bother with this? Just go ahead and let them become, like, their god form at that point. I feel like maybe it would have ruined what little pacing the story had, maybe. I don't know. It just seems, like, kind of weird that they give you these in-between... Because, like, the Vegeta hair guy actually does have a boss fight for you, technically. They all summon... If I recall correctly, they all summon something for you to fight before you fight them, or before they gain their third form. Because I know the female student does summon 3 archangels to fight you. I remember that the Vegeta hairline guy does summon, I think Samael to fight you. I'm pretty sure the young male student also wants to fight you, but again, like, why can't I fight them specifically? Like, they already have these forms, they have these models in the game. You really couldn't have designed the spell-based fighting style around them or something. Like, come on, well, would that not have been cool? Especially since they had such really good, well, especially since they all, their in-between forms were really nice, actually. But yeah, no, that's basically the story. Then now you have to hear all their reasons. You can't kill them beforehand. You have to let them become their gods. And again, I'm speaking from the True Demon run here. You go kill them in the Tower of Kagasuchi. Then you go up to Kagasuchi, which is what allows creation to exist. You kill Kagasuchi, and then you finish it off by fighting Lucifer in the True Demon ending. Beyond that story, again, that's the story. Like, there's not really much character elsewhere. There's not too many... There are some minor interactions you have with other characters, but again, nothing to really build up any sort of, like, feelings about it or anything. There's... For a game about a world in the middle of creation, that like anything can create the next world and that anything new can sprout out. I mean, like, you would think maybe like you'd learn more about these characters and see what motivated them further beyond, but it never really gets there. You just see they get hurt. You just see they get hurt and like fucked over in the vortex world a little bit, and then that just gives birth to their reason, I guess. Oh, okay. Yeah. So story not the best. Very bare bones. There are some decent cutscenes, but again, they're like spread out over the course of several not several games, several hours. Especially if you're doing the True Demon ending, so you don't really get any solid pacing to go with it, and you don't really feel the effects of these actions too consistently. Because even then, like, when next time you see the character, it's not like they're referencing, like, the stuff they've done in the past. So the story, very bare bones. Definitely only there to service a setting. Nothing more, nothing less. A little disappointing. But definitely not the worst premise I've ever heard of. Okay, so next up, I also will be talking about things in a more objective manner because that's how I experience them. I won't be discussing things like music since music is incredibly too subjective to even try. So, I'm not going to touch that in the slightest. There's also not going to be any like rather rhyme or reason to the order of these. They're just going to be random as we go about them because I wrote a list right here just to keep me on track. Just letting you guys know in advance. Map design. Oh, fuck me. I hated like 90% of the maps I was in SMT3. They weren't... It doesn't even feel like they were built with the premise that the world has fallen apart. Like, the theme of the world is like, oh, everything's kind of falling apart and like creation's falling apart. You're witnessing the end. You'll never fucking know. You'll never fucking know based on like how the actual thing presents itself. Like, everywhere's too fucking clean, and the places that are dirty, they don't really feel like they're falling apart or, like, being destroyed. I specify that now because I heard while I was doing the stream, I forgot who it was who said this, was like, that there's a theme to these things, but the theme's not demonstrated in the visuals, which is where themes for map design should be. No. Going to map design in particular, though, oh my god, this is one of the most annoying fucking games to navigate. So sometimes it gets better. Like buildings are a pain in the ass. A lot of the Kalpas were a pain in the ass to navigate. Although to be fair to the Kalpas, they are technically optional content. So take the any criticism I throw directly at the Kalpas. Keep that in mind. That's restricted to the True Demon ending. So which is the ending I played. It's just. But even outside of True Demon ending, the cave system for the trains is annoying as hell. Like. Those sprouting paths, the need for the light setup, they didn't have to set all these things up. The encounter rates, I'll throw them in with map design. Oh my god, the encounter rates. If you're not running an Estoma, I think it was, oh, fuck me. Those can get annoying and tedious real fucking fast. Because it's always right when you're about to go somewhere important or right when you're about to finish. They throw like 3 right at you. But going more into the cave system, since that's one of the ones I had the biggest problems with. You're navigating in the dark. There's, again, like, you can't set up a light system for it, but you have to pre-plan before that. It's still just a little annoying that they have to turn off the whole light thing to begin with. You go in there, and then you have to search for any sign to get out. You're going through a cave, technically. Unfortunately, all the walls kind of look the same, so if you're not careful, you do kind of, like, you can lose your way a little bit. Not all the caves are built equally as annoying. Some of them you have to slide down and do trial and error in order to find out what's the right area to go to because you have no way to predict beforehand what area is a smart idea. A lot of these dungeons have that issue where you have to predict. And just to be clear here, I don't think that puzzles inherently are always a bad thing or, like, I'm going to call it padding. Because a lot of these like more annoying sections for the fucking maps is usually padded out areas. Like for example, the Temple of Amala, the 3 pyramids. If I recall correctly, there's one with a shadow. That's a lot of trial and error. There's no way to predict where the shadows are going to be without first walking into a shadow, running all the way back to the front of the fucking thing, turning off the fucking, well, basically turning off the shadow world, and then trying it again over and over again. I just looked up walkthroughs at this point, but then you also have the White Amala Temple, which is a teleportation maze where you have to choose the correct teleportation sequence in order to get the hell out. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck trial and error again, testing every single teleportation to find the right order of events in order to get you out on your way. Even though I think these are annoying in the Temple of Amala, they're not the worst examples of it because the Temple of Amala like isn't right at the end of the game. But with that in mind, let's talk about right at the end of the game. Right at the end of the game, when you've already killed most, if not all, the gods of reason, you have to show up to the final, and not even the final puzzle section. There's another one after this, but technically if you beat both of them, you don't have to do the second one over and over again, so I'm not going to talk about that much, even though it is annoying that there's still a second puzzle section on top of the first puzzle section. There's a puzzle section you got to go through that you cannot avoid in order to make it to the top of the Tower of Amala, and it's another teleport maze. These teleport mazes can, even with the new hardware and the game barely being re-released, even still an old game, so it should still load pretty quickly, it's still a very, again, trial and error. You have to go through each teleportation cycle, figure out where each individual one goes. Again, I did look at my walkthrough because I'm not going to waste my time. But the way you would find this out normally is you have no way to predict where the next one's going to take you. You have no way to tell which direction is the right one. You have no way to tell when there's even going to be a teleport. You have to get teleported first, get out of the teleport cycle, and do it again. And sometimes there are literal 3-prong hallways, and 2 of them have teleports that lead you fucking nowhere. So you go into the wrong one. All right, suddenly you've teleported. You go a little too far in one direction, suddenly you've teleported. You go a little literally any mistake you make, you might actually end up teleporting. Oh, you're finally making some distance? Teleport. And even then, even if you figure out the right sequence on 1 or 2 to go, again, I'm saying this in the context of that, you got to, go through, I didn't look it up. You still have to find the other entrances. Now, granted, at least in the Tower of Kagasuchi, there's at least 2 areas that force you into the right way to go. I'm just saying, man, we're at the end of the game. Why are you throwing another fucking puzzle, another teleport hallway puzzle my way? I wouldn't even call it a puzzle. A puzzle's a brain teaser that kind of forces you to think about your decisions. There's actually some good examples of puzzles earlier on where you have to stop time and you walk into these pads where you have to think about your moves. You show up, you test it out once, and then you just figure it out from there. Granted, it's just one test, one test to try and figure out how everything works, where you want to go, using your moves smart, and then boom, then you're sort of back here. It's still trial and error a little bit, but it's faster to deal with. You can back out whenever you're not fully done with it, as long as you don't back out before the orb breaks off, or before the orb sort of turns off and you get, I think it's sent down the floor. But even then, that's still way better than dealing with teleportation puzzles because you at least know where you want to go and you can figure out relatively quickly what moves to open the door to get there. The problem with fucking the teleport mazes, especially at the end of Tower of Kagasuchi, is their placement, which is at the very end of the game. Again, as soon as you get past this annoying-ass teleport section, you do end up at the Kagasuchi fight after you go up one more floor, but there's an elevator set up there that takes you there real quick and easy. So it's just infuriating game design. It's just infuriating level design. They don't make it easy for you. Again, I bring up the Tower of Kagasuchi and the caves because they're the biggest examples, but they weren't the only offenders, or I say offenders, but they weren't the only examples, not by a long shot. There were so many examples I could think of. The only times where I felt level design wasn't completely just wanting me to fuck. Understand that navigating this fucking game's level design was more of a challenge and more of a consistent issue I was coming up into than actual death at the hands of the bosses and shit. That's how bad this level design was by comparison. I'm also not referring to the overworld here. I think the overworld navigation, while it is a little, weird, it's fine. It's not it's slow. It's really slow. It could have been a little faster, but it's not crazy something that I'm gonna be oh, this was terrible. But yeah, none of the maps really show off a destroyed world all that well, and even the ones that do try to show off a destroyed building, they don't really give me the same. They don't give the same effect or theme you would expect from a world dying. They just look like a messy, empty area. And I don't know, that just doesn't seem very effective at conveying the idea of what the hell's going on. None of the areas did. With the exception of, like, ironically, the Tower of Kagasuchi and like, yeah, I just really hate the fact they put a fucking maze puzzle right at the very end of the Tower of Kagasuchi, right when you're about to beat the game. It's just annoying because you can't bypass it either. It's not like once you figure out the path, like you can just walk into the teleporter the next time and it's like, all right, yeah, all right, we went through it once, that's fine. No, we gotta go through it every single time. It really felt like the developers didn't have confidence that their game was already going to be as long as it was, because there's just some examples of padding like that where you're just kind of like, why would you put this in here? Like, there's no way anyone would play tested this game if there was even play testing back. I'm pretty sure it was play testing for this game. That could be wrong. There's no way anyone played this and was like, yeah, this is a great idea. Give us another fucking puzzle we can't predict outside of the fucking trial and error testing. And it's not even like the teleportations are fast either. They're still fucking slow. Even on my like PC, which is like higher end than anything I was playing this game at the time, the teleportation takes so damn long. Same with the death screens, but I'll talk a little more about that later when we're talking about combat. Beyond that, just like incredibly frustrating design, really hard to determine where to go sometimes. Like you had a lot of times the worst ones where you basically either got lucky or you got screwed over and then you have to go back and try it again, etc., etc. Or they just give you ones where you deliberately can't tell where to go and you have to deal with it. And somehow it's not even like a brain thinking puzzle because like you can't figure out beforehand where to go. You have to just test every single door over and over again. I don't think that's good. I don't think that's a good game design choice when your decision to quote unquote challenge the player is to waste their time to map out your design area. I don't think that's good game design at all. I think that's terrible. And unfortunately, they required a few maps in SMT that did that. I'm not referring to the diet building. In case anyone thinks I'm referring to the diet building, I think the diet building was fine. In fact, I think the diet building was a great example of how you make a more, like, you know, guessing, puzzling section within reason. At least my personal opinion. Moving on, I'll go over I have fusions next. I feel like fusions next doesn't really make sense, but well, I guess we'll talk about fusions. The fusing mechanic, it's fine. I think it's a little annoying. The game gives you the option to fuse higher level demons that you can't fuse at all because you're not high enough level. That was a problem I had with Persona 4, so it's nothing too crazy. I do think it's a little annoying though that like even if you look up the recipe online for fusing demons, you still don't get the demons sometimes. That happened to me on occasion. Like I was never able to acquire Beelzebub despite getting both a tyrant. I think it's a vial, and I had the two demon types necessary to get Beelzebub. It's just that I wasn't able to get Beelzebub, so that was a little annoying. Beyond that, like, there's nothing too much more to say there regarding fusions. It was just a cool feature. I always found the triple fusion on the Kagasuchi kind of useless. I can't help but wonder if maybe, like, there is something more viable for that decision. Some of the more advanced fusions do require a triple fusion of some kind. Like, I think Metatron required 3 fusions, but beyond that, it was kind of, like, completely kind of worthless. The Menorah Wielders fusions were alright, but they had that whole Skull Stone set up, and I couldn't even fuse all the Menorah Wielders. At least I couldn't find the recipe for all of them in game, so meh. It's fine. I think buying the fusions is a little expensive, but apparently if you get 100% of the fusions, or just 100% of a demon compendium, you do gain access to a 50% discount on all demons, so the game does reward you for completing the compendium at least. Okay, so the next two... Okay, so I've already covered characters more or less. Also, in case someone's wondering why I have not discussed the teacher character in any capacity, that is mainly because of the fact that she shows up as a supportive character. She kind of let you guys live in the world. Well, not Demi-Fiend particularly, but it's kind of implied that she helped protect the other two. Demi-Fiend seemed to have gotten taken by Lucifer at some point and got the Magatami put inside of him. Beyond that point, though, that's more or less like all she does. She's ultimately a failure in her own existence, and her own god rejects her at every possible turn, essentially. Kind of, because the god does like her. Like, she offers her to leave that world, but your teacher decides to stay. for no good reason. Your teacher then kind of dies and gives you the ability to decide your own fate and your own future. So personally, while she's not directly stated to be a reason giver, I'd argue she's technically gives you the freedom ending. Technically, since if you reject everyone else, she still gives you the ability to get the freedom ending. So you're kind of accepting her reason to an extent. Because her reason was basically like the world's kind of fine the way it is, more or less. That was kind of the vibe I got from her, but maybe I'm wrong there. There wasn't a lot of time talking about it. So combat and preparations are next two. Oh boy. I'll talk about combat first, since that technically falls into my second point of preparations, but I'll go ahead and talk about this. So, combat is pretty basic in this game. I'm going to be honest, I've played RPGs with more in-depth combat, more in-depth interactions, more in-depth setup. I'd argue Persona 4 is more in-depth in combat than this game was. From what I remember, Persona 4, there was at least more things going on there than there was here. So let me break down combat for you. Combat can be broken down into probably three main categories. Weaknesses and strengths. This is your resistance section as well, by the way, in case anyone's wondering. Buffing and debuffing, and whether or not you're attacking with physical and like attack type. So let's break them down. So basically, the strengths and weaknesses goes as follows. If you're weak to something, whatever gets hit on that weakness, so let's say like the enemy's fire, like weak to fire, and I happen to have a fire spell. I hit him with my fire spell, and I get a free turn, essentially. Like, hitting him with the weakness got me a free turn. You cannot stack free turns on top of each other, but you can stack crits, from what I understand. I guess I should mention crits as well for free turns. Crits do matter somewhat, but unless you're building a full luck build, they come once a blue moon, so keep that in mind. Crits also give you free turns as well. Once you hit them once with the weakness, that quote-unquote free turn expires regardless. So it's good to get a free turn, but you can't double stack hits of weakness. I don't know if a crit on top of a weakness turn gives you that that same turn back. Usually crits on top of secondary turns don't usually do that, so I'm going to assume it doesn't. So now that we've covered weaknesses, how about strengths? And you can be weak to a lot of things. You can be weak to debuffing, weak to dark, weak to light, weak to fire, I think you can be weak to physical. You can be weak to a lot of things. So, discussing this a little further, what about strengths? There are three types of strengths in the game. There is, well, technically four, but I don't really count resistance as a strength. Resistance, or like just generic resistance, is usually that you just don't take as much damage from the attack type or the attack element that you resist. Number two is null. When you nullify any impact on you from that specific thing. This can be anything from physical to lightning to even holy, light, dark. You can nullify it. Now, if an attack is nullified, keep in mind that the player receives 4 turns to mess around with. A 5th turn is possible if you complete all the graveyards in the Labyrinth of Amala. Did not receive the 5th turn, so I'm not going to talk about the 5th turn. If you hit someone who's immune to a element or like attack type, they will take away 2 turns from you. You will lose 2 turns. Technically, you lose 1 turn, but I count it as 2 since the first turn is completely void. If they repel, you lose all your turns if you hit the repel. A good example of this is like, let's say I put Tetrakarn on my team and someone hits me with 1 physical attack. Even if they only hit 1 person and they only did 1 attack, they will lose their entire set of turns as a result of hitting a repel. It also works on the player as well. There's no way to tell if an enemy has a repel or any type until after you've started fighting them. So you will most likely always get hit with a cheap repel advantage at the start of any encounter that would have repel. The third and last strength is drain. What this does is, rather than return the damage back to the opponent when they hit you, it will heal you, still lose all turns, for the damage it would have dealt, or a portion. I think it's 100% of the damage it will have dealt, but it could be a portion. So let's say I'm dying and I resist and I drain fire. Well, if they hit me with a fireball, I have now healed back for all the damage they would have dealt me, or a portion. Again, I'm pretty sure it's all, but it could be a portion. So that's one part of the combat system. If that sounds complicated, that's only because of the way I'm describing it. It's not complicated when you see it in action. Hearing talk about it might make it seem more complicated. If I recall correctly, number 2 is debuffs and buffs. This is pretty straightforward. SMT, the way you play this game is you buff your attack over and over again. Maybe you buff your defense and your dodging ability too. And then you lower the opponents. Most bosses will have a way to cleanse debuffs on themselves and cleanse your own buffs. You can also have a similar setup as well to cleanse their buffs and cleanse your own debuffs. That's about it. That's the most essential thing besides strengths and weaknesses in SMT's combat design. In fact, there's even a challenge on YouTube, beat SMT3 video without buffing or debuffing. That's how like integral it is to the game, but it's like the only integral thing to the game beyond what I've already mentioned. So, strengths and weaknesses. Well, again, there's no way to predict this beforehand. Once you figure this out, there you go. Problem solved. Then it's just buffing and debuffing. I mentioned the third thing is attack types. Let's talk about attack types. There are 3 types of attacking in this game. Physical, magic, almighty. I'm not going to include debuffing and buffing as separate attack types personally. I don't really think that matters for the purposes of this video. Hang on, I lost my list, son of a gun. Because ultimately, debuffing attacks don't really do much. Even the ones that give you like poison and stuff, they don't do damage. So I don't really think it's fair to call them different attack types. Beyond that point, though, that's basically it. That's SMT's entire combat system. Physical is usually the best thing to build because most enemies don't resist physical. But on occasion, you will run into someone who resists physical. There's like, I think, 2 bosses you gotta go through for sure that resist physical, and they completely fucking ruined me and my physical build. So that was always fun. Definitely keep a few magic damage dealers around if you decide to play this game. Some people can resist magic as well. That's entirely possible, but I think I ran into... Maybe I just noticed the magical, like, the physical damage deal, like, immunity people a lot more. Maybe that was the reason going on there. But yeah, the combat's not very deep. That's it. It's very, very easy to manage. Unfortunately, this is where we got to talk a little bit about that trial and error system I mentioned earlier regarding the pathways. Without the knowledge of the internet to look up bosses beforehand, which I tried not to do, the only pre-information I had for a boss fight was Lucifer's health. Everything else, I kind of at least did the boss first before checking out like their stats and afterwards. I would at least lose the first time, honestly, before I would like look up their health bar and shit. I try not to look up moves very often though, because I think if you look up moves, characters don't get like it's not too fun to fight. But I'd argue characters that completely cause immunity to a form of damage, especially when like me, that was damage I built. They were never really fun to fight to begin with. But that's kind of that's an intentional decision, so whatever. But yeah, no. Once you figure out weaknesses, sometimes you can get fucked over by not even trying. Not like as in you're not putting enough effort in, but sometimes you can, let's say you're farming up a fucking Magatami that makes you weak to lightning. You might run into a boss who has lightning that you were unaware of, or even a normal enemy with lightning you were unaware of, and you could just die like that. There was no like way to tell beforehand what this boss was going to run at you, and there's no way to swap your Magatamis in the middle of battle. Which, to be fair, if you could swap Magatamis, I feel like the game would be, like, super baby easy. Because if you could swap resistances on the fly and you knew what all your Magatami did, there would be, like, very few bosses in the game that would cause you problems at all. But, like, it's a little silly when, like, you die because a random encounter, like, just completely fucks you over. Or a random boss fight shows up and you're just like, oh, shit, he has lightning attacks and I'm weak to lightning. Or my demon's weak to lightning. Because, again, as long as they can hit someone who's weak, they will get a free turn on top of this. And, again, that is extended to all enemies in the game who hit a weakness. So, always fun. Beyond that point, though, now, again, the same rules do apply to you. You resist their attacks. They lose turns as well. It's just that, like, unfortunately, you could die to a boss that you would have easily beaten if you could have just had a different Magatami set up. I don't think that's good game design that you die, not because of something you, the player, did inherently in the boss battle, But because before the boss battle, and again, you're not going to know what the fuck they're doing most of the time before boss battle, just out of nowhere, you just get hit by, like, the element you're weak to. It's not as frustrating, and it's also incredibly frustrating because, like, the actual fucking death screen is a pretty long one. On top of the fact you have to reload the entire game, you have to reload your save, hope you weren't too far behind your last save, which, the whole save situation is technically not criticism, that's just, like, an added, like, little, it's like, for a game that kind of expects you to die a lot, and a game that deliberately knows a lot of your deaths are going to be cheap or not because of your own fault, because the game doesn't give you a chance to prepare for anything before that point. Or, you know, sometimes you get really unlucky and sometimes you're just walking around and you decide to, for whatever godforsaken reason, wear the Magatami that makes you weak to light in the Vortex world. And an angel shows up and she's like, hey, die. Some of them are a little more silly than others, I will say. Like, if you're running around the Vortex world, for example, and you got a Magatami that makes you weak to light, you're kind of asking to die at that point, since there's no way in hell you are unaware that angels or the birds, I think, also will spam light insta-kill. So there's definitely some areas where the Magatami, and I guess we're following the preparations at this point, now we're talking about Magatami so much, the Magatami inherently doesn't, would screw you over, and you should know by this by now, since you probably didn't have it at the start. But there are other points where you have no way of knowing what the hell is going to happen, and you're not even, and you just get punished outright when the game doesn't, it's not like, okay, there's a lightning boss. Okay, demons before this lightning boss happen to use lightning, so you probably wanted to swap it in advance, because your grinding is probably not worth the headache you're dealing with. No, none of that. None of that actual, setup that would be smart, that'd be nice to have. There's no thematics around the bosses either. So it's not even like bosses beforehand will have minions who use their element or something, which would make sense and would warn the player, hey, maybe you want to try switching your fucking weakness to something else. Now, maybe that one's a little more on me complaining about that, but I just don't think it's fair if you go to a boss and you could have easily be in, or you could have been in with a decent difficulty, let's say a decently difficult boss, that if you could have been in them, but the reason you lost is because the Magatami you had just so happened to be the weakness the boss had. You have no way to swap it out, and you have no way of nullifying resistances. You have to hope you can set up, examples of either dodging, you can build, you can try buffing your, dodge mechanic, but sometimes you're just not going to be able, it's just not going to work sometimes. You're going to get hit regardless, even if you buff it up all the way. So, which is fine, but it's going to the preparations here. That's kind of what I want to talk about. SMG's combat isn't deep. Again, you go in, but if you're getting fucked over, you can okay, shit. Maybe I can sacrifice a complete 4 set of turns, or maybe I can give up 2 turns, swap my Magatami out, save myself, and then we'll go in for another. We can win this in one go. No. If you're fucked, you're fucked. If you're weak, you're weak. There's no chance you have of escaping this outcome. There's no way to help you get away from that situation. You're just here looking at your own death and thinking to yourself, the game didn't even set up the idea of that I was going to need a different resistance. I just walked in and died. Unfortunately, a lot of times when this occurs with boss battles, the save point, depending on what boss you were doing, the save point could be several rooms back. It could be right in front of the room. So depending on the boss, this can be more annoying than an actual serious issue, thankfully. But this is where, again, going into the preparations here. So that was more or less combat. But talking about the Magatami's preparation setup, you can't really prepare until the end of the game for all the bullshit the game throws your way. You can do your best to not have weaknesses. That's kind of the way you prepare in this game when it comes to yourself. The depth of this game is not in its combat. Its combat is incredibly simple. The depth of this game is in its preparation. You want to build a team composition of demons, and you want to assemble a group of demons whose main goal is, if you fucked up, and by I'm saying you fucked up, if you had no clue that you were about to fuck up and you walk into a really fucked battle, your goal is to set up demons who will cover your ass. Your goal in this game is to prepare an army to deal with any contingency possible. This usually involves having a lot of buffers who probably also heal you as well. At least one healer per team composition. You need at least one, bar none, because sometimes you're just going to get fucked and you have no choice but to heal. And you're probably going to want to endure, probably. You might also want a cleanser as well, depending on if you use Dante or Raito. You already have a built-in damage dealer cleanser. Beyond that, that's basically like the extent of SMT's depth, fusing demons, setting them up with proper move sets, letting them cover the more absurd challenges of the Vortex world. Also, by the way, in combat, if you die, the game's over. It's one of those games. It's a little annoying, but whatever. I'm not going to sit here and like fully blame it. It seems to be just a theme of the genre. I guess not every, I guess I'm more used to, more Western RPGs where the party can die, including the party character, but as long as, your main healer's alive, they can revive the entire party. So yeah, that's more or less its depth. It's just preparing for every possible scenario. That's the whole point of setting up demons. You prepare for every scenario that would kick your ass, or every scenario that you aren't fully aware of. You're sort of preparing for things you cannot be ready, you most likely will not be ready for. Or you're preparing for an overall balanced team that can handle a lot of threats. That's what the game sort of advises you. It's kind of like the Art of War there, where it's no man or all men can see the strategy or the tactics by which victory is achieved, but no man can see the strategy by which victory is acquired or some shit like that. I'm not too familiar with the direct quote, but if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. Or you've probably heard the quote somewhere before. Maybe on a Technoblade video or something. Anyways, so here's the problem. By the end of the game, you can't prepare for everything because they literally add mechanics in the game that are unpreparable. This is mainly in the form of almighty damage. You resist magic? You got that one ability that reflects magic. Does not work on almighty. You can raise your defense to counter almighty attacks, but you can't resist them in any capacity. You can dodge them though, but again, the whole, they're a third of the game, the weakness system is gone. The game also basically encourages you to use almighty attacks by the end of the game, since they're unblockable, undodgeable. No, they're not undodgeable or unblockable, they're unresistible for the most part. I think even physical almighty attacks can't be resisted, or almighty attacks that base themselves off the physical stat. I think even characters who repel physical can't resist them. No character in the game can resist almighty damage except for Lucifer, but technically we'll talk about the true demon ending stuff a little further along. So the game basically ignores one of its designs, and now you're left with buffing and debuffing, and you're left with, well, actually it takes out two. Because by the end of the game, you're probably not going to be using elemental attacks too often, because most enemies will resist that element, good chance. Or if they don't resist that element, most bosses will either be unaffected by it directly, or again, you're running the risk of them resisting it. So at that point, you're probably going to want to sit down there and just, use almighty damage for the most part, which is kind of what I ended up doing for most of the end of the game, because it kind of removed... Almighty damage just removed one of the bigger problems of the game, or not bigger problems, one of the bigger mechanics. And I don't think, and to be fair, as Persona 4 had almighty damage do the same thing, I just think it's a little silly that all this work and all this clear game design setup for a preparation-based system gets thrown on its ass by the end, because you can't prepare resistances anymore, because again, most people are going to be using almighty. That being said, the final bosses do still use some elemental damage attacks. Very surprised on that one. Kagasuchi, I think, uses at least a fireball. I think he uses Ice and Force as well. Lucifer also uses Ice and Force. But they mainly use their almighty attacks for the most part, which is what I would have expected them to use. But keep in mind that there's still some resistances you can work with out there. And then some resistances you get can be godly. Resist physical. There's a resist magic too. Like Michael, if you craft Michael, he fully resists all magic attacks except for, almighty, because I guess almighty isn't magic. But yeah, no, by the time late game comes around, your preparation strategy changes from resisting elements or resisting types of attack to just building up strong stat-based demons with abilities that can help you mitigate most issues or can help you deal with most issues. Which again, where most of the depth for this game comes from. Alright, so I have menorah wielders talking about next. So we're starting to get more into the boss battle situation. I'm going to be honest here. The menorah wielders are optional content except for one. And we're going to talk about that one because, again, I beat True Demon Ending. Because that one menorah wielder, again, all optional bosses, they all have their unique gimmicks. They're all they're cool designs. Apparently, everyone used like the monk menorah wielder. I never crafted him until like the very end of the game, so I never got to experience how good he was. I mainly used Hellbiker and Matador. Let's talk about Matador for a minute. Son of a bitch. Matador was the single hardest boss in SMT3 for me. He was the boss I died the most times to. He was the boss that required me to grind up not the most. Actually, I think he might have been the boss that required me to grind up the most, actually. Matador's referred to as a noob trap, and they're completely right, because when you first show up to fight Matador, you're not going to have any demons unless you already... You're either going to be under leveled when you fight Matador the first time if you're going in blind, or you're not going to have a demon who resists his ability. When I went to go fight Matador, I had both situations under my belt. I had no one who resisted force, and on top of that, I had no one... I wasn't strong enough to fight Matador. So I had to grind up to level 19, which is like what kind of recommended on a few forums, or like level 18. I went to go craft, I think, Umi something, who resisted force, and that's how I beat Matador. I had to grind up for a bit, then I went in and beat Matador, no big deal. Took a while though. It took a while because I thought I could beat him consistently. Like I was like, all right, let's go in again, let's go in again, let's go in again. But I could not beat him without getting stronger beforehand. I'm sure if I tried hard enough, I would have been able to get the outcome, but I just kept getting like my ass beat by Matador. Because not only does he have really strong AoE attacks that you're not ready for at the start, especially when you're fighting him, he has something else that, good God, I hate this fucking ability. It's probably one of like my 2 least favorite abilities in the entire game. And again, I beat the game on True Demon Ending, so I faced probably a good portion of the entire game's difficulty curve. Red Capote is a fucking nightmare of an ability because it breaks the game's balancing. So, you remember how I mentioned the balance and debuff system? That's how it works. You buff your attack, buff your defense, stuff like that, buff your dodging. Well, Red Capote buffs your dodging. But unlike every other buffing and debuffing ability that either has a drawback if it does it more than 1 level at a time, or you have to buff it 1 level at a time, Red Capote is a single use, only on Matador ability that lets him buff his dodge ability and his agility, I guess that's what it's called, by 4. So with the press of 1 button, Matador can buff his entire dodge system, or like his entire dodge stat, to the max buffing level in 1 turn. And that also includes his hit rate as well. So he'll be able to land more hits on you at times 4 his base value. He already has a very high base value agility. I did look up online because I was like, holy shit, that's insane. Is there any way to deal with that buff immediately? Obviously, for those of you who have played SMT, there is an ability that lets you remove your opponent's buffs instantly. Unfortunately, you're not going to have that when you fight Matador. So you have to survive and drop his dodge rate back down to a neutral level, and then hope that like you can kill him then. Again, keep in mind he's doing lots of AoE damage on you the entire time. You do not risk physical. He is using a lot of physical abilities. I believe he can also give himself focus as well, but I don't know if that's in the boss battle or if that's just when you get him as a demon. But Red Capote plus, honestly, just Red Capote plus the fact that you fight him when you're under level and you don't have the way to cheese his, like, the way you beat him is you cheese his mechanics. You get a person who's immune to force and you strip him of his turns. He can still kill you if you're not high enough level, but it makes the fight a lot easier because he loses a turn, usually because he'll start with his force attack. Sometimes, like near the end of the game, he didn't use his force attack, or near the end of the fight, he doesn't use his force attack that much, and he just keeps using his AoE physical attack on you, which just completely fucking destroys you. Something like that. Sorry. But yeah, no, he definitely cost me the most lives of all the menorah wielders, but only because I didn't have options. And unlike the other menorah wielders, Matador is not an optional boss battle. You have to fight Matador, and you have to beat him. I've even heard some complaints on some forums that Matador is so unbalanced by comparison that once you go fight like Thor afterwards, he's a walk in the fucking park by comparison. I've heard people say that the game's not balanced around the menorah wielders. I don't know about that. I think that's not entirely accurate, but I can definitely understand the sentiment. I do think Matador being forced, because again, like you can ignore the other menorah wielders even if you go to their area. You can't ignore Matador. You have to fight him. You can't even come back later when you're stronger and be like, all right, Matador, I'll come back when I'm a little stronger and I'll kick your ass then. You know, we'll make it a little fair. No, the game's like, no, you have to fight him now to progress the game. And he's clearly going to have a better kit, and it's going to be a harder, difficult boss fight than anything else you're going to encounter in the main game normally. And you're just kind of like, who designed this? The voice lines for all the menorah wielders are pretty cool. In case anyone's wondering, the only other menorah wielder that caused me trouble substantially after Matador, and I think took like two, 3 tries, was Black Rider. If I recall correctly, Trumpeteer killed me once, and then I killed him on the very next go around. But it's Matador, Black Rider, then Trumpeteer. Every other boss was and Mother Harlot, but Mother Harlot only beat me. She only beat. I think she did kill me once. Mother Harlot only beat me because I did a physical build and I wasn't expecting a menorah wielder to be immune to physical. So, that was on me. But yeah, no. Oh, Matador. Definitely guy haunted my dreams for a while. I kept him on my team for a while, but like even by the time I beat Lucifer and everything, I looked at Matador and I'm like, you're still the most terrifying boss I ever faced in this game. You're still like the worst one of them all. I want you to know that, Matador. You're still the worst boss I fought in this game. Just also full extension. I don't know if I mentioned this. I played this game on normal. I might have to add that in the comment section or like in the little description for the video, because apparently the game's praises are given on hard, even though almost everything I've complained about so far doesn't change with difficulty. But, you know, just letting you know, I played it on normal, so if anything I say here, you guys don't think it's valid because I played on normal, I'm just letting you know now, don't worry. I'm letting you know 1 hour into this. Yeah, no, none of the other menorah wielders really worth the damn. Even when you craft them, they're not all that good by comparison. Matador was alright. Black Rider, I got the most mileage out of Hellbiker for sure, which is not a pun actually, but still. Voice actors were all great. The voice lines were pretty solid. Black Rider was the last menorah wielder I crafted. I never got around to crafting Trumpeteer. I don't know if you could have crafted Trumpeteer. But yeah, Black Rider was like the last menorah wielder I used, I think, at the very end. Moving on here. I've already covered Matador. I guess I'll talk about Dante. So I bought the game mainly for Dante since Dante was in it. Even though I like Persona 4, I had already heard that SMT was not like Persona. So I slapped on that Dante and I was like, you know what? Let's fucking go. Dante's kit's really cool. In this version of the game, they gave him Pierce. That's going to be important because apparently Lucifer is the only character in the game who ignores Almighty. Fuck me. So they gave Dante Pierce. His kit's really good. He's a debuffer, but he has a debuff that has a drawback. Rather than debuff their defense 1 at a time, it debuffs their defense by 2 and buffs their physical attack by 2. So there's a drawback to it, but it does restore all of his mana. Or not all of his mana, but it does give him a good mana restore. Unfortunately, I kind of deleted one of his better abilities, so by the time I was done, I was only using him for Stinger, debuffing, and cleansing, because he does have Holy Star that cleanses. A lot of his almighty attacks just fucking sucked outside of Stinger. Good durability. He also had his own Endure as well, which was really nice. Endure is one of the best abilities in the game, I would say, right next to mana refill. But yeah, beyond that point, Dante's just a really cool character. They did a good job with his like story arc. He fights Demi-Fiend, beats Demi-Fiend pretty easily. You can get him for 1 Maka. You get him as a high level demon at the start, you don't get him to like the very end of the game almost, like near like probably 60-70% of the game. But by the time you get him, he's already like level 80 along with Pixie, so it's like, alright, fine. So they gave me Dante late, so that way I wouldn't have to worry about leveling him up all that much. Alright, fine. By the time I was done, my Dante was like level 97. And then after killing Lucifer, it was 99. So yeah. Yeah, after Dante, just the boss fights we're talking about. Most of the boss fights were boring as shit. There was no innovation in almost any of these. There was no uniqueness to them besides, oh, this boss resists this, or oh, this boss uses this element, which is rather a shame for a game that had such a basic combat system. It kind of got a little repetitive after a while. Thankfully, there were a few bosses who broke this mold a little bit. I'll talk about one that caught me off guard that wasn't at the final run. It was in the tunnel system. The first one not the first one you deal with, I think, but in the tunnel system, there's a boss that creates 4 clones of himself. You have another trial and error design. You have no way of telling which one's the real boss. You have no way of guessing, even after they swap, how to find him. They didn't unless I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure there's no way to find him. I looked around the shadows, I looked around on Jazz. Maybe I missed something, but as far as I'm aware, you cannot tell which one is the real person to hit. I feel like if I wasn't fighting that boss at level 90 something, I would have probably been a little more annoyed with that boss's mechanic. But by the time I got to him, I was already so high level that even when he hit me, I was just like, oh well, that's I guess. All right, no real big deal here. Oh no, he's hit me for 200 HP. Whatever will I do? So again, I can't help but wonder if maybe I'm being a little more kinder towards this boss because I was already so damn strong by the time I got to him that I didn't really care about how annoying his gimmick was. Because in principle, the gimmick is fucking stupid. You clone yourself 4 times, and keep in mind, after every hit, you lose your 4 turns. So you have no way of guessing more than 1 hit per turn. If you get lucky, you get your 4 turns to hit him, and then he disappears again. You cannot AoE to get rid of the other clones. I believe they all dodge it. And basically, you're going to be wasting your turns, or I say wasting your turns, you're going to be buffing yourself up for most of your turns. And then after you buff yourself, you're going to do 1 attack on him. He's an all-shadow creature, so his design was really nice as well. I'm not going to talk too much about SMT's designs. I think the designs were fine all across the board. There wasn't anything I was egregiously looking at, wow, this is fucking terrible. Son of a gun. I am recovering from a sickness right now, though, so a little annoying. But going off on that, beyond him, there were very few bosses I remember that weren't part of the final set. So I'll just be talking about the final boss setups here. First boss you encounter is the Vegeta-haired god one. And he had this really stupid gimmick where at the start he'll declare you cannot use something. If you do use that item, it will inherently deal massive amounts of damage to you. I think it's an insta-kill, but I had Endure, so I learned my lesson 1 time, and I was like, fuck that noise, we're going to listen to him. He gets killed pretty easily, but that was a decent gimmick. The second one is neat. The second one is Noah, we'll call him, or the male student. The way the male student's gimmick works is he'll change his resistances every turn. So 1 turn he resists physical, the other turn he resists magic, and back and forth. You're not going to know which one he's resisting until you test which one gets dodged or which one's not getting dodged on the turn of, and just assume it gets dodged on the next turn. Again, no way to tell otherwise. Completely random. I don't think it's random. I think he starts off resisting magic. I could be wrong on that. But again, complete trial and error situation here. Hang on. Sorry, got a message. But once you figure it out, as long as you keep your wits about you, you should be able to get through the gimmick no problem. Or you can just break the game's mechanics with Almighty, because again, nothing reflects Almighty, nothing resists Almighty except Lucifer. So yeah, very silly, stupid kind of endgame mechanic that invalidates even the game's final bosses. But again, Persona had that, so I'm not going to give it too much harshness, except I would argue that it's worse in this game because this game cared so much about preparation, and at the very end it just kind of shits all over that, but whatever. Then the last one is the female student. Her main gimmick is summoning 2 people to help her, and then a transmutation. As far as I'm aware, she's the only character in the game who can turn you into a bee and shit like that. So you have no way to plan for her, no way to prepare for that boss battle in the slightest. And again, in a game that seems to very clearly incentivize preparation for boss battles, no way to resist it whatsoever. At least, not that I've seen. But then again, I played through one playthrough, and no one could give me an answer. Not even the 3 reason wielders I had to deal with in real life. An Australian, a guy who loved the game way too much. Well, I say way too much, but like, I'm throwing... I'm definitely throwing stones from a glass house there. And a guy who didn't even play the game who kept telling me how much of a shit player I was for my entire playthrough. So that's always fun there. They're all friends more or less, but... but yeah, so even when I asked them, like, hey, how do I counter this transmutational ability? And they are like, they just kind of stay quiet. So I guess the 3 gods gimmicks are just, well, except for poor, Noah over there, I guess they're just undealable with, or like they're just not easy to come about. They're not even really counterable for the most part, except again, poor Noah there got shafted because again, the late game's like, hey, this whole like balancing system we've had around like magic and all this jazz? Yeah, we're just gonna ignore that. So after that, it's the final 2 boss. Oh yeah, we fight Thor again, beat his ass, move on. Thor's not really that special. I'll be honest, even among the hidden bosses, Matador was still one of the hardest bosses I had to, like, probably the hardest boss I had to deal with. Because even Metatron and Beelzebub, like, Beelzebub killed me once, maybe twice, I think, but, like, I beat him pretty easily. And Matador killed me once before I came back and beat his ass. Or not Metatron. Metatron. I was gonna say, no, Matador kicked my ass a lot. What the fuck did I just say? Yeah, like, Metatron's fucking... Even the secondary bosses were all kind of fucking not very strong by the time you get to them. Again, because the game incentivizes preparation. The game basically tells you, hey, we have bullshit balancing that you can't deal with on the spot, so you better prepare for it beforehand, otherwise you're going to get fucked. Yeah, no, so... I mean, like, that was about it. We got to Kagasuchi. Kagasuchi was a fucking pushover. And keep in mind, I'm saying all of this, and I haven't even mentioned Pierce yet. If you do the True Demon ending, you gain access to Pierce. And Pierce allows you to nullify the stupid resistances the game threw your way. Because with Pierce, what's that? They resist physical? What's that? They resist magic? Not any fucking more they don't, because you have Pierce. Although, I don't think Pierce works on elemental resistances. I'm a physical build, and Dante was the only other person I had with Pierce on my team. And I just kept using Dante's almighty attack. So, I don't know if it works on elemental damage as well. It does not work on Reflect. It only works on immunity too. It does not work on Reflect or Drain as far as I'm aware. But again, I don't think it works on elemental attacks. I could be wrong on that though. But once you have that, a lot of enemies stop being fucking so hard. It even feels like even people who resist it, like they have higher base resistances, let's say. Like, let's say they resist 50% of your attack. Even they fucking, like, get just completely shit on by Pierce. Like, the end game content is like, oh, here you go. All that trouble you had preparing and everything? Well, to reward you for your preparations, now you don't have to worry about that game anymore. You're playing a completely different game now. You're not dealing with that shit anymore. Like, for example, because I heard how bad the Lucifer fight was. Because, like, everyone was telling me, oh, it's going to kick your ass. Oh, you're not going to stand the chance. No way you're going to beat it on your first try. So I got the high-end gear, I got the last Magatami, which invalidates every form of attack but almighty in the game. I got a lot of the high-end demons, even though I just got Metatron and that was it. I went up to Kagasuchi. I beat Kagasuchi's ass like it was nobody's business. He did almost kill me because he had one decent attack. One. He had like a 40k health bar total, which I felt was kind of stupid, but it wasn't... I felt like maybe he should have had more health. It was really kind of like... The difference between him and Lucifer's health bar was like night and day. So, I have the full build. I got the full Magatami. Let's go. I don't have full stats. My demons are not fully statted out. They don't even have optimal builds. And I go up to Lucifer. A boss I've been hearing about for the longest time. Was a fucking nightmare. And that was super strong. I beat it on my first try. And then afterwards, even though none of this information came out beforehand, I basically got like not belittled, but like my accomplishment basically got invalidated by the people who knew the game. The Australian guy mentioned one of the 3 quote unquote reason wielders in my real life situation here was like, oh, well, you're level 90 something, so of course you were gonna be Lucifer. Of course it was gonna be easy for you. I'd be more surprised if you lost to Lucifer at level 90. I don't have an Australian accent to mimic. And I'm just like, yo, that's fucking crazy how you never mentioned that at any point beforehand. Then I had the other guy who never played the game. We found out he never played the game, and I just looked at him and I was like, all right, you need to shut the fuck up whenever I'm playing this game. And then the third guy basically came to me and was like, no, but you didn't beat it on hard. Because apparently the real praise for this game's combat comes from hard, even though I know damn well hard mode changes fuck all. In terms of its actual mechanics, it only makes the game more frustrating. But hard mode is where the game's praised at. Now, just to be clear, if they had told me it was hard mode at the beginning that everyone praised the game at, I would have beaten the game on hard mode. And I'm just over here like, yeah, no. I've seen the hard mode boss fight. That being said, if any random SMT fans made it this far, even though I'm just bitching about the game at this point, Lucifer didn't heal on my first run through. I did the Dante run. Does he only heal on the Raito run? Because I've heard that the Raito run might have some differences, but I've seen on the wiki that he scripted to heal his full HP back on the first time you do 40k damage to him. So I don't know where that heal went. Either way, I beat him first try pretty easily. My worst, he didn't even kill a single one of my demons. He got close to killing Dante at one point, but never got close again. The only problem is that, he forced me to switch to Pixie in order to fucking get a new fresh healer on the board. But beyond that, boss fight was super easy. And then afterwards I get told, oh, I over-prepared for it. Oh, level 90. Oh, it's not, well, obviously I told you the Australian level 90 situation. Apparently hard mode's not the proper way to do it, or at least not the true experience, even though I've heard no one specify hard mode Lucifer being the one that's the true experience. And then on top of that, I guess getting the last Magatami was overkill. Preparing for the final super boss everyone talked about. I guess I over-prepared. Beyond that, actually, I will say Lucifer was probably the most balanced boss I fought, because even with all my preparation, he was still a fun boss battle, or at least he was probably one of the more fun boss battles. He did have some pretty strong moves, but I wouldn't call him cheap. I wouldn't say he cheated or anything like that, or that he was cheating the game's mechanics. He was pretty fair all across the board. That being said, though, I was a little surprised he did not have the other second ability I hated in this game. Almost every boss in the game has the ability to give themselves more turns, even Kagasuchi. They have the ability to give themselves 4 turns instantly, which buffs them up to 5 turns. Of course, the player has no option to gain more turns outside of the mechanics or by clearing the graveyard. God forbid they let us have an ability for 200 mana that gave me 2 turns or something like that, The game's balance is so fucking flimsily held by a deck of cards that if you were to put anything into it, I feel like you could break the game no diff. You could change Magatami. You could give up 4 turns for that Magatami switch, and it would still break the fucking game. So yeah, you could have a decent analyze and it would break the fucking game. So yeah, no. I think that's more or less it. Regarding my thoughts on SMT, I think I've covered boss battles that were you can't really prepare for. They're kind of cheap, but by the time I got to them, they weren't that bad because I basically level capped the game. I did play the game on normal. Ending was fine. I can't really think of too much else to talk about. Oh yeah, actually, I'll talk about one thing that came up after the fact. I was told this was a bad thing. Oh, well, you had to use walkthroughs, the people who made those walkthroughs had to go through trial and error. I believe this was used in defense of the trial of the trial and error system that this game implements for a lot of its content. And I'm I'm just thinking to myself and yeah, I use walkthroughs because the game doesn't respect its player's time. Treats its player like fucking trash. Demi-Fiend gets treated better than I do in this fucking game's design. fucking even that fucking one guy who gets turned into fucking Amala juice probably got treated better than most people did with their playtime. Just doesn't respect his players, which is damn shame if I'm being honest. On top of that, if the game gets again, the walkthroughs just made the game better. Like the information just made the game more enjoyable. Oh, but the enjoyment of the game is suffering through poor design because you can't prepare. Like again, like even though the game forces preparation, you can't really effectively prepare until mid-game, which is like 30 hours in. That's when you finally get enough options with your demons to finally do some decent preparation setup across the board. Before that point, you're basically just begging for dear life. Or you get lucky, or you die, and then you come back with the proper setup and beat the boss easily. This is the funny part, too, is that the same people will say, like, the same guy will probably be like, oh, well, you died because you didn't have the right Magatami. Yeah, but if I go back in with the right Magatami and I beat this fight super easily, then, like, imagine what could have happened if I could just swap the Magatami around. It's not just one of them, it's both of them, because they both defended this game so hard. Like, again, like, maybe I'm over bitching on a couple things here. I'll completely acknowledge that, but, like, a lot of these points are valid and can easily be seen. Beyond that, oh yeah, items. So yeah, got the last Magatami. You have to get every other Magatami beforehand. Puzzle Boy was a fucking nightmare. Even with the walkthrough, that puzzle was a fucking nightmare. Beyond that point, that was like the worst Magatami to get a hold of. Some of them were a little annoying to navigate to find, but that was like the worst one. Items are pretty good, but they kind of fall off after a while, besides chakra drops. Chakra drops are the only ones that matter. The music, I mentioned at the beginning, it's very like... Okay, so its atmosphere doesn't exist. It doesn't really set up like a world that's destroyed. I already mentioned that with the level design. But the music never gives off that weird feeling of like, shit, something's wrong. Get the Caretaker, like someone mod in the Caretaker's second album, that whole Dementia stuff. Get that in there. That'll spice up that'll spice up the thematic. That'll spice up the atmosphere. I promise you that much. The music's also incredibly compressed, so you can barely tell what the fuck's being said. In fact, it's such a joke in the community at this point that they're still debating what the proper lyrics of Forced Battle are, or Fierce Battle, depending on like how you want to say it. Beyond that, I was also called out to say a discussion on how personal skill plays a role in this game. Again, all of the skill and all the depth for the combat occurs in the preparation phase. Once you get into battle, you either have the tools you need or you can mitigate them in some capacity. But if you're going to mitigate them, you're probably mitigating them with your own preparation beforehand. So, for example, it's like, oh, when you bounce back from a fight, you were at a disadvantage. Yeah, because you probably already set up a healer, you probably already set up a buffer, and you probably already set up someone else who can probably do some Tetra cards or something. Like, unfortunately, you either have the pieces set up beforehand or you have items that help you survive. And only Demi-Fiend can use items. Only Demi-Fiend can summon or use items, so if you need to use a heal item, you need to waste your Demi-Fiend's turn. On top of that, again, it's like you either have the pre-preparation stuff beforehand, or you just don't got what it takes, and you're going to be at a massive disadvantage. I think you can come back from a lot of scenarios, but there are certain scenarios you're just going to have a really hard time coming back from if they have your weakness on lockdown. Like when I was going for the last Magatami, I was way stronger in all those bosses, and because I had this one lightning weakness, I think, on my Magatami at the time, I died to him because he focused me down. RNG also plays a big factor into a lot of these things, which is never a good sign. If RNG is such a massive factor that it can make or break a boss fight, or it's one of the core reasons the boss fight can be considered hard, because going at the Lucifer boss fight and looking at it, a lot of people pointed out that the Lucifer boss fight, even with preparation, a lot of it is RNG based. You have to hope the RNG's in your favor. If you have to hope the RNG's in your favor, you haven't designed a good boss fight. That's just a shitty boss fight. If, like, it's not hard because of what it does on its own, it's hard because, like, oh shit, sometimes the RNG might kick your ass. That's not a good boss fight. If like, and that's one of the reasons I kind of like, I saw the hard mode difficulty and I'm like, okay, nothing crazy is going on here. I've seen this full arsenal. And then it's like, oh, I guess he can randomly heal himself multiple times depending on what his RNG is. I mean, I guess if you consider that a harder boss fight, I mean, yeah, it is, but it's harder because, like, you have to pray the AI goes merciful on you. You also have to hope the AI doesn't focus down your player character, because I don't care how good of an SMT player you are, if, like, the bosses focus down your main character the way Lucifer can at times and the way other bosses can at times, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're probably going to get fucked over pretty hard. No amount of player skill there will probably prevent that if you, like, 100% aggro on Demi-Fiend, which is what sometimes these hard difficulties feel like. Beyond that, that's more or less it. Unfortunately, while a lot of my complaints here, a lot of my thoughts on, like, the game might not seem too crazy by itself, you compound this over several hours, over the course of several weeks, and they just bring down the experience of the game immensely. So, more or less why I gave it a 5 out of 10. I don't think I sold how much I hated the map design by far. That was probably like one of the worst things about it. Random encounters also fall in the map design, because the way the random encounter system in this game worked, it wasn't bad when you were grinding. It was bad at any other point, but you could use an ability to make that a little easier. But if you do, you're not as high a level, and you don't get as much money, so there is a little counterbalance there. No side quest whatsoever, so there's no way to mitigate that sort of like trade-off. But yeah, no. I think that's more or less my thoughts on SMT3. I don't really think there's... I think maybe someone in the comment section might ask me a question. I can't think off the top of my head. But beyond that, that's about it. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for your time as always. Have a nice day. And I'll see you guys on the next stream or video. Take care, everybody.